Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We're studying the wisdom Psalms of David, and we're going to be reading Psalm 15 today. And if it sounds familiar, it ought to, because it's very much parallel to Psalm 1. A Psalm of David. O Lord, O Yahweh, who shall sojourn in your tent? Who shall dwell on your holy hill? He who walks blamelessly and does what is right, and speaks truth in his heart, who does not slander with his tongue, who does no evil to his neighbor, does not take up a reproach against his friend, in whose eyes a vile person is despised, but who honors those who fear the Lord, who swears to his own hurt and does not change, who does not put out his money at interest and does not take a bribe against the innocent. He who does these things shall never be moved. I really do think Psalm 1 is inspired by this psalm, and I think this psalm really provides a boilerplate for Psalm 1. Psalm 1 is clearly written as the introduction for the whole book of Psalms, and like the whole book of Psalms, and each individual collection within the book, we start with wisdom, we end in praise. So it's crafted for a specific purpose. This is a one-off. It's a Psalm of David. I believe that it is written before not before Jerusalem is the capital, but clearly before the temple, as the temple is envisioned. David, of course, didn't build the temple, but he collected all the materials preliminary to building the temple, so Solomon could do it. But anyway, all the elements that we saw in Psalm 1, the description of good versus evil, the good man versus the unrighteous man, the sins are envisioned in the same way. And we have denial of God. We have slander and reproach, which is scoffing. We have the way that man can stand and not be moved, like a tree planted by rivers of water, unlike the unrighteous person who cannot stand before God. We have almost thought by thought is repeated and developed in Psalm 1. O Yahweh, who shall sojourn in your tent? Who shall dwell in your holy hill? It's interesting. We think of tents and the Feast of Booths and the wandering people. And then we also think of the hill, maybe Mount Sinai. So we can connect back to the wilderness and the Exodus experience. But then again, where did they worship in the wilderness? They worshiped in the tabernacle, a tent. And when David was king in Jerusalem, where was that tent planted? It was on Mount Zion. And so he may be saying, and I think more so, but it all connects. He may be saying, who has the right to be in your tabernacle? We also have a connection to Psalm 23. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. David expects that he's able to be there and will be there eternally. He who walks blamelessly and does what is right, speaks truth in his heart. There's that phrase in the last Psalm, Psalm 14. He said in his heart there is no God. The person who speaks truth in his heart, the person who is honest to himself and about God and about the way the world is. Person who doesn't delude himself, doesn't lie to himself. It really starts out with us from the inside out, being honest about God and being honest with ourselves. And then there's the way we treat other people, not to take up a reproach against a friend, not to slander with our tongue, not to do evil to our neighbor. Jesus said the 2 great commands: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself. So did the lawyer in Luke chapter 10. It makes sense. It's borne out over and over again. Our responsibility, it's in the 10 Commandments. Our responsibility to God and then our responsibility to each other. Verse 4, in whose eyes a vile person is despised. If David wears his heart on his sleeve about something more than anything else, it's this. To the point that I think he even at times frightens himself. And I'm thinking about the end of Psalm 139, where David says, I hate those who hate you. I hate them with an absolute hatred. And then he says, search me and know me. And if there's any way in me that's wrong, I need you to cleanse it out of me. And that psalm is such a beautiful psalm. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. You know me better than anybody. Really is about David saying, man, I hate these people so much. And I need you, if this is not okay, to fix it. And he mentions it here in verse 4. In whose eyes a vile person is despised, but who honors and fears the Lord. The phrase swears to his own hurt and does not change is either out of place, it should be a line earlier, or there's a word dropped, or it connects there, or maybe it does not. But I think that that who honors and fears the Lord is parenthetical. So the person who swears to his own hurt is the bad person, and not the good person. Anyway, usury is condemned. It's condemned in the law, and so we didn't want to mention that. It was wrong. It was wrong. It was sinful in the Old Testament to collect interest on money that you loaned someone. So let's not forget that. That's in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verses 19 through 20. Bribery also condemned in the same chapter. So anyway, we talked about in Psalm 1 the ossification of evil, but there's also in Psalm 1 the contrast of the stability of the man who is righteous. And we end with that as well. We start with walking, and we end with not being moved. That's not an ossification process. That's the process of being firmly grounded, rooted like a tree, planted by the waters. Okay, well, thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. Next time, we're going to take a few days to talk about Psalm 19, which is perhaps the most important of all the Psalms for us today, anyway. So we'll talk about Psalm 19 next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.